There are three types of muscle tissue. It's skeletal, cardiac, and smooth. And these types differ in structure, location, function, and then also means of activation. Let's talk about muscle similarities. Skeletal and smooth muscles are elongated, and these are called muscle fibers. Now, when it comes to the muscle contraction, this depends on two types of myofilaments. Myo is muscle, by the way. Filaments are fibers. So there are two, actin and myosin, that we're going to learn in here. You find that muscle terminology is similar throughout. Even though we have different types of muscles, we still use the terms that are similar. For example, sarcolemma, sarcolemma, this is the muscle plasma membrane. Sarcoplasm is the cytoplasm of the muscle. You notice that I use sarco in both those. Sarco, myo, and mis, all three, those prefixes, mean muscle. Okay, let's talk about skeletal muscle. And I'm going to move off of table 9.1 and move into table 9.3. I really like this one. Skeletal muscle is packaged in a way that it covers the entire muscle, but then this also allows for attachment to our bony skeleton. And we'll look at the details of that in this chapter. It has obvious striations or stripes. You can see that from my picture here, all the little stripes going down, those are striation. When it comes to control of your skeletal muscle, this is voluntary or conscious control. You're in charge of your skeletal muscles. Skeletal muscle contracts rapidly, but it tires quickly compared to some of the other muscles. This is responsible for overall body motility. So your movement all depends on your skeletal muscle. And this is an extremely adaptable muscle. This can exert forces ranging from just a fraction of an ounce to moving, 70, 80, 200, several hundred pounds. Okay, next muscle, cardiac, occurs only in the heart. It's striated like the skeletal muscle, but it's not voluntary. You're not in control of your cardiac muscle. The contraction of skeletal muscle is a fairly steady rate, and that's set by the heart's pacemaker. We'll study that in later chapters. Now, we do have neural control going into the heart, and this will allow your heart to respond to your bodily needs. My third muscle you can see up there is smooth muscle. This is found in the walls of all your hollow visceral organs, that's such as the stomach or the urinary bladder. Your respiratory passages contain some smooth muscle. Your blood vessels, if they're large, will contain some smooth muscle. Anyway, this muscle works to force food and other substances through those internal body channels. You can see from my picture that it's not striated, but it's also not voluntary. So this is involuntary. You are not in control of it. Now, when it comes to the functional characteristics of muscle tissue, we can use the word excitability or irritability. And this is the ability to receive and respond to stimuli. After excitability, we have contractility. This is the ability to shorten forcibly. We have extensibility. This is the ability to be stretched or to extend. We have elasticity. The elasticity says that this is the ability to recoil and resume the original resting length. Okay, muscle functions. I've already said that skeletal muscle is responsible for all locomotion. Cardiac muscle is responsible for moving blood through the body, just about crossed over cardiac and smooth there. Smooth muscle then helps maintain blood pressure and squeezes or propels substances through the organs. Muscle does some other things as well. Muscle maintains your posture. Well, that makes sense because that's skeletal muscle. It stabilizes your joints. We talked about that in the previous section. And one of my favorite ones is skeletal muscle is where you produce heat in your body. So your body temperature, a big portion of that is coming from your skeletal muscle. Each skeletal muscle is a discrete organ. It's composed of muscle tissue, blood vessels, nerve fibers, and then a lot of connective tissue. And so let me step up here a couple pages, go past, there we go. This is figure 9.2a. If I move myself back up, that's better. We have three connective tissue sheaths that are related to the skeletal muscle. We have the first one is the endomysium. Endo is on the inside. So here's the word right here, endomycelium. And what this is a fine sheath of connective tissue. It's composed of reticular fibers. I don't know if you remember, reticular are the ones that are woven. But anyway, these are reticular fibers that surround each muscle fiber. And each muscle, and when it comes to fiber, we can, and we're talking about skeletal or cardiac, we can say muscle fiber in place of a muscle cell. That's how we distinguish it. So when I use fiber just then, I'm talking about an individual muscle cell. They've got their own connective tissue around the outside of it. Now what we do is we take a bunch of these muscle fibers and we group them together. And that group is actually called a fascicle. So there's my fascicle here. And the connective tissue that surrounds the fascicle, right here's the word, perimycelium. Okay, so it's a fibrous connective tissue that surrounds a group of muscle fibers. And then we take all of our muscle fascicles and we group those together and we surround those with this overcoat. This overcoat is dense regular connective tissue surrounding the entire muscle. And this is epimycelium. And you can see from my picture here that my epimycelium then is going to form my tendon, which connects into my bone by way of Sharpies or perforating fibers, which we had in one of the previous chapters. Okay, each muscle is served by one nerve, an artery, and one or more veins. And each skeletal muscle fiber is supplied with a nerve ending that controls the contraction. I don't know if you caught that. Each skeletal muscle fiber, cell, is supplied with a nerve ending that controls the contraction. So contracting fibers require this continuous delivery of oxygen and nutrients. That's where the arteries come from. And then of course, waste have to be removed via the veins. Now, most skeletal muscle spans joints and are attached to the bone in two places. We had this in the previous. When the muscle contracts, the movable bone, this is the muscle's insertion. This moves towards the immovable or the anchor, and that is the muscle's origin. So the muscle they're showing here, this is the brachioradialis. You can see that it's tied into the humerus up here. Now, when this muscle contracts, my forearm is going to move towards my upper arm. So therefore, my humerus is my anchored bone or my origin, and my radius is going to be the insertion. Okay. When it comes to the microscopic anatomy of a skeletal muscle, I said before that each fiber is long and cylindrical, but it has multiple nuclei, so multiple nucleates, and that's just beneath the sarcolemma. These fibers, a muscle fiber, can be anywhere from 10 to 100 micra in diameter, but then up to 100 centimeters long. So some of these things can run all the way down your back, which I think that's kind of interesting. Inside the sarcoplasm, you have numerous glycosomes and a unique oxygen-binding protein. It's called myoglobin. So myoglobin catches that oxygen molecule inside this muscle cell and holds it for when we need it. Because when it comes to your muscle cells, we're producing a lot of ATP, and we need to make sure that that energy form is always available to us. The fiber contains the usual organelles. So the myofibrils we'll talk about here in a little bit. We've got what's called a sarcoplasmic reticulum. Now, in a normal cell, you would have called it an endoplasmic reticulum, but a sarcoplasmic reticulum in a muscle cell. There's something called a T-tubule, which we'll get to as well. But you can also see that we have a number of mitochondria because we are needing to produce a large amount of ATP. Okay, so these myofibrils here, these are a dense packed rod-like contractile element. These are what make up most of the volume of muscle. So what I'm looking at here, this is one muscle fiber. This is one muscle cell. And you can see that we've just packed it full of these myofibrils. That's what we mean by it makes up most of the volume. The arrangement of these myofibrils within the fiber is in a way so that you have a series of repeating dark and light bands. And you can see from my picture here, my figure 9.3b, the dark bands we refer to as A band. I always remember these because of the second letter. There's the A for dark band. And then the light band, the lighter area here, this is the I band. So we can see those. Okay, you're looking at, let's go here. Yeah, we'll go with this one. Okay, so you're looking now at a sarcomere. Muscle, mirror. Anyway, this is the smallest contractile unit of a muscle. We define a sarcomere as the region between two Z lines. So there's my Z line here, my Z line down there. And again, this is just packed myofibrils. Okay, so it's composed mainly of myofibrils. And we've got the thick and the thin filaments. From this picture here, this is figure 9.3c, does a little better job. And so there's my Z disc, there's my thick filaments there. There's the blue one there, that's my thin filament. My light band, if we were looking at this on a big picture, there's my I band and then my A band. So that would give us that striation. By the way, this Z disc here, this is just a coin-shaped sheet of proteins called connectins. This anchors my thin filament. So there's my thin filament right there. And then it connects my myofibrils to one another. The thin filaments do not overlap the thick filaments in the H zone here in the middle. So you can see that we have overlapping here, but it stops in the H zone. So even though we're in the dark zone, there's a lighter portion to it, for what it's worth. What else are we missing? Oh, the M line falls in the middle of the H zone. This is another protein down the middle, okay? So I'm gonna jump up another slide. I like this one. So we're now inside this myofibril. We're looking at my thick filament here and my thin filament out here. My thin filament, you see now that we have named it. This is actin. My thick filament here, wherever it's at, myosin. There you go, right there. And we've named some of the other proteins. So each myosin molecule, so each of these, there actually has a rod-like tail and two globular heads. To me, they look like you've taken a couple golf clubs and twisted the tails together. The tails are just an interwoven heavy polypeptide chain, and then those heads are two smaller light polypeptide chains, and these heads are called cross bridges. Now, when it comes to this thing down the road, we're going to see that this molecule can actually bend here at the neck, and then it can also bend at the tail. And that's kind of important later when we get down into the sliding filament theory and how this whole thing's working. Okay, my next one here, there's my thin filament. The thin filament's composed of the protein actin. Each actin molecule is a helical polymer of globular subunits called G-actin. So each one of these is a G-actin, the blues that we're looking at here. The subunits contain active sites. So underneath this, whatever color you want to call that, yellow, orange, tan, whatever stripe, you have an active site underneath that. That's where that myosin head wants to attach during contraction. The other things that we have here, we've got a troponin complex, that's the yellow molecules, and then we have tropomyosin. That's that string that's covering those active sites. So this is, the longitudinal section with one sarcomere going from Z disc to Z disc. And I think I want to stop this video here because I think that gives you plenty to study. Yeah. And we'll pick this up in our next video.